Well, of course, we're talking about the IPP's debt rising, the latest Energy Commission statistics painting a bleak picture of power security. But what exactly is our mix when you look at hydro and thermal? Joining us in the studio, Isaac Kofi is on hand, looking spick and span. Isaac, what is the picture when it comes to our thermal hydro mix?
Well, Benjamin and Sweetie, I'm sure if you sample 10 Ghanaians and you ask them, where do we get our electricity from, most of them will say hydro, Akosombo, or Bui. But I'm sorry to disappoint you that that is not the case, because the picture has actually changed, and we'll be studying the data right from 2000 to 2024, trying to let you understand the kind of situation we are in and why we are asking the big question, is this a national security threat, as we have shifted from hydro now to thermal. Now, this is the outlook that we are seeing. The first distribution is the fact that just 28% of the country's installed capacity is hydro and 70% is thermal. Why is this a big problem? This is a big problem because this is where you have most of the independent power producers and fuel suppliers, flooding this space, and that's where we get most of our power from, which means the slightest change in the economy, the slightest, illness of the city, we possibly will see some sort of doomsaw and rising debt in the energy sector. What we are trying to ask is that why has this been made to stand this way in terms of the distribution, and the fact that this is actually piling up debt in the energy sector. And Ghana's energy sector has actually been a debt-making machine. And according to the president, if you combine fuel suppliers and IPPs in terms of the debt we owe them, it's now around $2.5 billion, dollars. And the Minister of Energy actually said that in terms of shortfalls, which usually comes as a result of forest losses and transmission losses, we pay close to about 30 billion or 24 billion Ghana cedis every year, and they cannot go ahead doing that anymore. So this is the tracking we've been doing, studying the data from 2000 to 2024, letting you understand that there was a point in our life where red, which means hydro generation, where most of our installed capacity as a country was actually coming from hydro. But now the picture is different. And when did we start to see this? That was 2014, 2015, 2016, when we had that big doomsaw, period. And it was under President Mahama. That was his first, stanza as a president. Now it's his second stanza. The interesting thing is that when he introduced the IPPs in 2015, 2016, he didn't really get time to stay with them, to see how they operate and see how to manage them. But now he's back, he has actually started his second stanza, and the picture is different, where he has to commit $50 million every month to pay fuel suppliers and IPPs. And as you can see, the gap is widening. The country is now depending heavily on thermal. This is a chart that is of interest to us, looking at the fact that some time ago, or once upon a time, we used to get most of our energy from the dams, the Akosombo dams and the Bui dam. But the story is not the same anymore. And as you can see, the distribution and how hydro has stagnated over the period, definitely because of the high cost involved in putting up hydro, dams. But if you are deciding to go on the tangent of thermal energy, then you need to ask yourself, is your economy robust enough to support it? When you have depreciation of the currency, are you going to experience power outages? But the breathing space that maybe the ECG and the energy sector will get is the fact that the cedi is now performing well against the dollar. And so if you are looking at the commitment they have to be paying to independent power producers, about $50 million every month, that will reduce and put less pressure on the ECG in terms of their cash waterfall mechanism, commitment every month. But the big question we are asking is that this graph that we are seeing, is it a big national security threat? Looking at the fact that we have now shifted from hydro, where 70% of the country's national installed capacity now comes from thermal, Sweetie and Benjamin. That's the situation at the moment.
I mean, if you look at the numbers there, you would see that there's an odd 2% or 2% that is unaccounted for.
Exactly.
Of course, if you are focusing on the thermal, then the HFO and other things will come into play.
Exactly.
But what are we looking at when it comes to green energy?
Well, it doesn't seem to be a big conversation in our energy mix at the moment, because if you add 70 plus 28, you see that just 2% is now coming from the other energy. I mean, you're talking about solar and other forms of energy, renewable energy, which means that we're not really doing, significantly well when it comes to the renewable side. We are now focusing, burning gas now to produce power. And if you are going on that tangent, just like you said, HFOs and gas supply will be a key determinant. And just like the energy minister said, now we are going to establish a second, natural gas, plant. That will mean that the country has already decided that this is the path we want to go, thermal energy. But the big question is, will you be able to get the over $1 billion every year to buy fuel? And the Energy Commissioner said it, that, look, natural gas will be the main determinant in terms of looking at how power supply will be stable in the country. If we go back to the period where we had fluctuations in the exchange rate market, definitely the energy sector will suffer, because now the country's energy sector depends majority on actually, how the city perform. If the city misbehaves, you should expect some power supply, fluctuations, or maybe I should use the word doomsday.
Yeah.
But this is the current, picture that we have. And for me, it's scary because we've moved from more than 60% of hydro, now just about 28% in terms of the national supply of electricity or power. It was not the same, but it actually changed somewhere 2015, 2016. And it'll be interesting to see how President Mahama and his energy team will actually solve this paradox.
So you say you're scared. Are we on the precipice? Because I've also heard those in the energy sector, including the sector minister, give assurance that though where we are is precarious, there's no fear of, rampant power outages a la doomsday.
The reason why I am scared is that just last year, we had about 7 threats from independent power producers who said, if you don't pay us, we will.
We still have those.
Exactly.
This year alone.
Powership says that if you don't pay, we will. Why? Because we are owing them $400 million. That is very huge. You had WAPCO at a point to say, look, you are owing us. If you don't pay us, we are not supplying you gas. Are we going to live in this paradox for the rest of our life? Aren't we finding, other alternative renewables? Are we going to go on the tangent of thermal? I feel that the thermal approach was to solve the problem temporarily, but it looks like we are stuck with it because it is the easiest way now to produce power, bring on board plants for them to produce, get the energy and supply. And when you have difficulties, you have doomsday. Is that the situation? Is that the current trajectory we want to go? That's why I said I am very scared, because if you look at how debt is racking up in the energy sector, for me, it is very scary. And if we are not able to possibly solve this quagmire, the energy sector will always pull us back when we want to move several steps, ahead in terms of being in a very stable economic situation in the country at the moment.
Well, fingers crossed. Hopefully the city doesn't misbehave and we can begin moving on to green energy and all the other renewable sources of energy.
Probably.
Isaac Ofieje, thank you so much for keeping us up to speed on what's happening in the energy sector.